When we teach guitar, we talk a lot about the left hand, right? We're talking about chord shapes and triads and inversions and all kinds of cool things that we love to do. But arguably, the right hand is just as important, maybe even in some cases more important. If you've got even just a very simple chord progression, it can still sound incredible if the right hand is strumming right in the pocket, killing the groove, maybe even changing up the rhythm here and there, maybe doing some stops, maybe adding strums or removing strums. If the right hand has got it, the left hand doesn't even need to be that fancy. So let's examine some great strumming techniques, the secrets that some of the pros do. Just to cover the very basic, because we got to make sure we got this down first, and that is that generally speaking, downbeats for the right hand when we're strumming are down strums and upbeats are up strums, right? So if I took a real bog standard strum pattern like this one, right? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, and those are 1, 2, 3, 4 like that. The ups are and, so 1, 2, and. Let's just quickly try a more complex pattern, like an 8-beat pattern. That would, you could say it's still 4/4 time, but maybe it's covering 2 measures. So it might be something like this. You can sense all that empty space that I have in my strum, and you'll notice that my right hand is still swinging just a little bit, even when I'm not hitting the strings, because otherwise my right hand might lose place for which one of those downbeats and which one of those are upbeats, right? So I count it in, you can hear and all that empty space right after beat 1. It'd be like 1, 2, 3, 4. Was even emptier at the end there, but you can see this guy has always got to keep swinging so we don't lose our place. And if we do that, what's so useful about that is that we can add or remove strums whenever we feel like it. And adding and removing strums keeps our strumming interesting. We don't really want to hear exactly the same strum for the entire song. Sure, chord switches and all that can keep it interesting, but we want those added or removed strums at times so that we have some dynamic change throughout the song. Because adding strums makes it sound louder just because there's more, or busier, or more exciting, and removing strums makes it sound so much more chill. So for example, in a verse you might have fewer strums, in a chorus you might have more strums. Let's try this track, and I'm going to give just a basic, fairly empty, but not too empty, strum that I might do on this rhythm. So we'll call this part the verse. I definitely leave some empty space. So especially if you're going to have a singer or some other lead instrument over top, you don't want to interfere with that too much. And you don't want to get too exciting right at the top of the song. You want to save some energy so that you can bring the song back up for a chorus. And so what would we do there? All we have to do is if we keep our arms swinging appropriately on the downs and the ups, then we can just add more strums. You can practice this by choosing very specific strums. Like I've got in my book called Guitar Strumming Like a Pro, which got tons of examples for you to practice. But when you get good at it, you're not really thinking too much about what precise strum pattern you're playing anymore. You're just adding more strums because you know this guy's got it. So for example, a chorus strum might sound like this. what I just strummed there? No, I don't really know. I'm just making sure to fill in extra space with that strum. And there's lots of other techniques we can do to keep it interesting. For example, you might have noticed there at some point, I actually did kind of a scratch, or I just stopped the strings. That's just another interesting rhythmic trick of many that we can throw in. So all I did, at some point, I don't know what point, I take this part of my palm and I push it against the strings here to stop the strings. I could also, if I want, push my pick through a couple strings. That's the key with scratch that I think a lot of students get wrong, is they think that when you want to do the scratch sound, you got to scratch through all the strings, but you don't, because generally you don't have time. And all we're really looking for is just like a little percussive sound at that moment anyway. Or don't even do the scratch. I don't even know if I did a scratch there, or if I simply just stopped to the strings. It's kind of cool. That was right before a chord change. It sounded nice. Again, it's just ways of changing up how we play. Another good way of changing up about how we play to make a different part of a section sound interesting is removing strums. So next part in this jam track here is a bridge, and the drums and the bass are very different. So we want to match that, right? We don't want to just keep doing the same groove, the same strum. Maybe we remove a ton of strums and just do what I call holds. In this case, it goes to a C chord, and we can just let that ring for a bit, and maybe we'll add some other tricks as well. But let's hear what that would sound like in a real simple form. See, I added a very small little arpeggio in there. I hit the C chord, I just let it ring, and sometimes you want just a little extra just to help that chord to keep ringing through that space. I did the same on the G chord. I just hit any 2-3 notes, whatever, of the chord. And the other thing I did is kind of funny. I realized I broke my rule a little bit. At the end of that bridge, I wanted to have a crescendo. I wanted to get louder, and I started with doing all downs for that crescendo. And you know what? That just works really well. So I broke my rule of keeping upbeats up, and I went down, 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 down. But still, that's super common on guitar. Generally, it's not going to mess you up. And it just sounds right for those moments. There's something stronger sounding about doing those crescendos as all downs. Okay, so we have some parts now, but what we also want is we want some ways to connect chords. You'll notice that my left hand is barely doing anything, right? So we're sort of gonna talk about the left hand for a second, but really most of it is coming from this, because I'm not gonna think about anything too clever here. I'm just gonna apply some connections to different chords. So all I had was an open G to an open C, right? I could do one of the absolute classic moves that is in a lot of acoustic guitar strumming, is one of these hammer-ons. So whenever you have an open G chord, which in guitar we know is often, right? Do this little hammer-on trick whenever you're on the G. Going to a C chord, it works really well. You don't have to do it going to a C, but guess what? C chord has the same kind of hammer-on trick. It's just in a different place. It's up a string here. It's kind of nice. We're hammering on the third. It's just a nice way to add some more texture to the chord, to your rhythmic ideas. You can throw them in anywhere, right? Anytime you got a G, there it is. Anytime you got a C, there it is. So let's say I'm going back to a verse, and I'm going to throw in some of those little hammer-ons, and you can see it's really effective. So those hammer-ons give it a little bit of a country rock vibe, which, you know, may not suit the song, but it sounds good here for sure, and they're so easy to do, especially in this key, because all these open strings are also in key, so you don't even have to be that careful with your right hand. If I'm on a G chord, I don't even have to hit just that string. I can hit that individual string, or I can be more loose like this, and I'm hitting kind of 2-ish strings there on the hammer-on. Still sounds good, right? The same works with the C. It sounds good because all those notes are still in key. And that way, we don't have to be too careful with our right hand, which can be difficult because we can be going from a wide strum, making sure that our downs are downs and our ups and ups, and it can be hard to suddenly make your hand switch to a very small movement to hit one individual string. So we don't need to worry about it as much. We definitely want to think smaller movement at those moments. We don't want this as much, right? Like, you can't even hear the hammer on if I just bang through the whole chord, right? I can sort of hear it, but not as much. So it's more like, and sometimes you don't need to strum the whole chord. So that's another thing, is you don't need to strum all the strings of a G chord. Sometimes just hit the root. Maybe sometimes just hit part of the chord here, right? Maybe just some of the strings, especially in a verse or a quieter part. And then again, when the chorus comes around, you can start banging away. And finally, don't forget that when you get back to that verse, let's say the chorus is ending and you're going to a verse or bridge or whatever, remember to bring that volume back down again. The worst kind of amateur mistake of bands is that once they hit the first chorus, they're loud, and then the whole rest of the song is loud, right? We want to have a song to have some dynamics throughout. You want to bring it back down. You get the audience excited in the chorus, bring it back down. It sounds kind of sweet, more relaxing, and then you get to have another build-up, because the build-ups are the most exciting parts anyway, so you want lots of those. Okay, with all those ideas, let's hear how this whole thing is going to sound. And that was all done just with open chords. If I had been doing bar chords, we could be using some of the other techniques that we've got in this channel. And I could be playing some connections through chords with major pentatonic scales, for example. We've got a video on those kinds of chord scale connectors right here. You can check that out. My name is Blue Morris, and I teach guitar lessons here in Vancouver and on Patreon and right here on YouTube. I'll see you in the next one.